My name is Amanda, and I was just another cog in the machine of a bustling investment company, perched high up in a sleek skyscraper. I was good at my job, damn good, if I'm being honest. As a leading specialist, I juggled multiple responsibilities and kept the place running like a well-oiled machine. My boss, Melissa, the owner of the agency, was a force to be reckoned with. Picture a stern, domineering businesswoman in her early 60s with sharp eyes that could cut through bullshit faster than a hot knife through butter. She ran the place with an iron fist, and we all danced to her tune. Me? I was the perfect employee. Always the first one in, last one out. Weekends? What were those? My entire life revolved around spreadsheets, client meetings, and endless cups of coffee. I lived alone in a modest apartment, no husband, no kids, just me and my career ambitions. Then came that fateful day. I woke up with a pounding headache and a stuffy nose. Any sane person would have called in sick, but not me. I dragged myself to the office, determined to push through. The day dragged on, and I fell behind on my work for the first time in. Well, ever. The Stevenson report was due, and I was nowhere near finished. As the clock ticked closer to our daily briefing, panic set in. "Where's the report?" Melissa demanded as soon as she walked into the conference room. "I'm not quite finished," I stammered, my face burning with shame. Her eyes narrowed dangerously. "Not finished? What the hell have you been doing all day?" "I'm sorry, I'm not feeling well." "I don't give a rat's ass how you're feeling," she exploded. "You had one job, one fucking job, and you couldn't even do that right." The room fell silent as she continued her tirade. "You're useless, you know that? A complete waste of space. Maybe I should replace you with someone who actually knows how to do their job." Each word was like a slap to the face. I sat there, stunned, as tears welled up in my eyes. Before I knew it, I was on my feet, running out of the room. As the doors closed behind me, I let out a choked sob. Years of pent-up emotions came flooding out as the elevator descended. I was so lost in my misery that I barely noticed when it stopped a few floors down and a man stepped in. "Hey, are you okay?" a gentle voice asked. I looked up, wiping my eyes, and saw a kind face looking back at me with concern. "I'm fine," I lied, my voice cracking. "How about we grab a coffee?" he suggested. "Looks like you could use a friend right now." I nodded, surprising myself. As we walked out of the building together, I realized this was the first spontaneous thing I'd done in years. We found a cozy little coffee shop just around the corner from the office building. As we settled into a quiet booth, the stranger introduced himself as Jack. "So, want to tell me what happened back there?" he asked, sliding a steaming cup of coffee towards me. I took a deep breath, trying to compose myself. "It's just work stuff. My boss, she can be pretty harsh sometimes." Jack nodded sympathetically. "Sounds like a real piece of work. What do you do?" I hesitated, not wanting to give away too much information. "I'm in finance. Investment stuff, you know. It's a high-pressure job." "I can imagine," Jack said, "but that doesn't give anyone the right to treat you like crap." We talked for hours, carefully dancing around specifics about my job or boss. Jack was easy to talk to, and I found myself opening up about other aspects of my life, my childhood in a small town, my dreams of making it big in the city. Jack reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Sounds like you've worked hard to get where you are. Maybe it's time to start living for yourself, not just your job." As the sun began to set, we reluctantly said our goodbyes, but not before exchanging numbers. "I'd like to see you again," Jack said with a smile that made my heart skip a beat. From that day on, something changed. I went back to work, facing my boss's wrath with a newfound strength. Her words still stung, but they didn't cut as deep anymore. Because now I had something to look forward to outside of work. Jack and I started meeting regularly. Coffee dates turned into dinner dates, and soon we were spending every free moment together. For the first time in years, I felt alive. Then, exactly 1 year after we met, Jack took me to the same coffee shop where we'd had our first conversation, and proposed to me. Tears of happiness streamed down my face as I said yes. As we celebrated, Jack suggested, "I want you to meet my mom. She's the only family I have left." "What about your dad?" I asked, curious. Jack's face clouded over. My parents divorced years ago, Dad. He doesn't want anything to do with me anymore. It's just me and Mom now. A few days later, we pulled up to a stunning mansion. My jaw dropped. This is where your mom lives. Jack nodded, looking a bit embarrassed. Yeah, she's well off. As we walked up to the front door, I felt a twinge of nervousness. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. The door swung open, and I froze in shock. Standing there looking equally stunned was my boss, Melissa. Mom, Jack said, oblivious to the tension, "This is Amanda, my fiancée." I couldn't breathe. Melissa, Jack's mother, stared at me with a mixture of surprise and disgust. Hershey spat out, "You're marrying her." Jack looked between us, confusion turning to realization. "You two know each other." Before I could say anything, his mother cut in. "She works for me. Or should I say, under me." "Really, Jack? With your money and position, you could do so much better." I felt my face burning with humiliation. But then Jack did something that made me love him even more. He put his arm around me and said firmly, "Mom, Amanda is the best thing that's ever happened to me. I'm marrying her, with or without your approval." In that moment, despite the shock and fear, I felt a surge of gratitude. Whatever came next, at least I wouldn't face it alone. Despite the rocky start with Jack's mother, we went ahead with our wedding plans. It was a small, intimate ceremony just the way we wanted it. Melissa didn't show up, but we didn't let that dampen our spirits. We were young, in love, and ready to take on the world together. We bought a cozy apartment, our first shared space. Those early days of marriage were blissful. But there was always a dark cloud looming over our happiness, my relationship with my mother-in-law, who was also my boss. At work, things went from bad to worse. She seemed determined to make my life a living hell. During a management meeting where I was presenting our quarterly results, she interrupted me mid-sentence. "Is this the best you can do, Amanda? My son's houseplants could put together a more compelling presentation." The room fell silent. I struggled to maintain my composure and continue, but my cheeks burned with humiliation. At the company Christmas party, she cornered me by the punch bowl. "Nice dress," she sneered, loud enough for others to hear. "Did you find it in a clearance bin?" Every day brought a new torment. She'd criticize my work in front of clients, mock my ideas in team meetings, and make snide comments about my background. But she never fired me. I knew why. Despite her personal feelings, I was damn good at my job. The agency relied on me, and she knew it. I'd come home every night, frustrated and on the verge of tears. Jack was always there, ready to listen and comfort me. But his attempts to reason with his mother only seemed to make things worse. She became convinced that I was trying to turn Jack against her, and her treatment of me at work became even more vicious. One day, after a particularly nasty encounter where she berated me in front of the entire office for a minor typo, I couldn't take it anymore. I ran to the bathroom, locked myself in a stall, and broke down. When I got home that evening, Jack found me curled up on our bed, still in my work clothes, eyes red and puffy from crying. "That's it," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "You can't keep doing this to yourself, Amanda. Why don't you quit? We can manage on my salary for a while until you find something else." I looked at him, fear creeping into my voice. "But what if I can't find another job? Your mother has so much influence in this industry." Jack sat beside me, taking my hands in his. "We'll figure it out together. I can't stand seeing you like this anymore. Please, Amanda, for your own sake, walk away." The next day, with Jack's support, I handed in my resignation. The look on my mother-in-law's face was a mixture of shock and fury. "You ungrateful little gold digger," she hissed. "After everything this company has done for you? You're just going to abandon ship? You'll never work in this industry again? I'll make sure of it. You'll be crawling back, begging for your job in no time." That night, as I recounted the day's events to Jack, I couldn't shake the fear that she might be right. What if I couldn't find another job? What if I had just made the biggest mistake of my life? The weeks following my resignation were a whirlwind of job applications and interviews. Despite Melissa's threats, I managed to land a position at a smaller investment firm. It wasn't as prestigious as my previous job, but it was a start. Slowly but surely, I began to adjust to my new routine. The work was challenging, my colleagues were friendly, and best of all, I didn't have to deal with my mother-in-law's constant belittling. We saw her rarely, usually just at obligatory family dinners where she'd shoot me icy glares across the table. Months passed, and I started to feel like myself again. The constant knot of anxiety in my stomach began to loosen. Maybe, just maybe, things were looking up. Then came that fateful day. "Amanda, can I see you in my office?" my new boss, Mr. Johnson, called out one morning. I followed him, my mind racing through possible scenarios. A promotion? A new project? The grave look on his face as he closed the door behind us told me it was neither. "Amanda, I'm afraid I have some bad news," he began, not quite meeting my eyes. "We're going to have to let you go. Your work has been exemplary. It's just, well, I can't really explain. My hands are tied here." "But that doesn't make any sense," I protested, feeling tears prick at my eyes. "You can't fire me without a reason." He sighed heavily. "I'm truly sorry, Amanda. If it were up to me, you'd stay." Here he pushed an envelope across the desk. "It's not much, but it's a severance package. I hope it helps." I left the office in a daze, clutching the envelope. The spring sunshine felt mockingly cheerful as I started my walk home, too shell-shocked to even call Jack. That's when my phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello," I answered, my voice shaky. Well, came the all-too-familiar voice of Melissa. "How does unemployment feel, Amanda? Not so high and mighty now, are we?" In that moment, everything clicked into place. The unexplained firing, Mr. Johnson's discomfort, it all made sense now. "You did this," I whispered, anger replacing shock. "You got me fired." She laughed. A cold, cruel sound. "Oh, darling, did you really think you could just walk away from me? I told you I'd ruin you, and I always keep my promises." I hung up without another word, my hands shaking with rage and fear. When I got home, I broke down and told Jack everything. "That's it," he said, his face flushed with anger. "I'm going to talk to her. This has gone too far." But his confrontation with his mother changed nothing. If anything, it made her more determined to see me suffer. The following months were a blur of rejection and disappointment. Every promising lead would mysteriously dry up. Every interview would end with vague excuses. I started taking whatever work I could find. Waitressing on weekends, dog walking during the day, even some freelance data entry work. Anything to contribute to our household. Another few months crawled by, each day a struggle to keep my head above water. Then, out of the blue, Melissa showed up at our apartment one afternoon while Jack was at work. My heart raced as I opened the door, bracing myself for another verbal assault. But to my utter shock, she smiled warmly. "Amanda, dear," she cooed, her voice dripping with sweetness. "May I come in?" Stunned, I stepped aside, watching her warily as she swept into our modest living room. "I've been doing some thinking," she began, perching delicately on our worn sofa. "All this fighting, it's not good for the family. Jack's birthday is coming up, and well, I thought it might be nice to bury the hatchet." I stood there, speechless, as she outlined her plan for a surprise party at her house. We could invite all his friends, colleagues. It would mean so much to him to see us getting along, don't you think? Every instinct screamed that this was a trap, but a small part of me desperately wanted to believe her. Maybe, just maybe, she had finally come around. Against my better judgment, I agreed to help with the party. On the day of the event, I arrived early at her mansion, ready to help set up. But as soon as I walked in, I knew something was terribly wrong. The house was already full of guests, all of them turning to stare at me as I entered. Melissa stood in the center of the room, her phone held high, live streaming the entire scene. "Oh, look everyone," she called out, her voice sickly sweet. "The help has arrived." Before I could react, she tossed something at me. It fluttered to the ground at my feet, a maid's uniform. "Put it on, dear," she said, her eyes glittering with malice. "After all, serving is what you're best at, isn't it?" The room fell silent, all eyes on me as my mother-in-law continued her tirade. "You see, friends, Amanda here comes from the slums. Her parents were factory workers, people like her. Well, they're only fit to serve their betters, aren't they?" I stood there, frozen in shock and humiliation, as titters of laughter rippled through the crowd. In that moment, something inside me snapped. All the months of abuse, manipulation, and cruelty crystallized into a white-hot rage. I bent down, snatched up the uniform, and hurled it straight at her face. "Go to hell," I snarled, my voice shaking with fury. Then, holding my head high, I turned on my heel and stormed out of the house, leaving behind a chorus of gasps and Melissa's indignant shrieks. I stumbled into our apartment, my whole body shaking from the ordeal I'd just endured. As I closed the door behind me, I heard Jack's voice from the bedroom. "Amanda, is that you? I'm just getting ready to head to Mom's for." He stopped short as he entered the living room and saw my tear-stained face. In an instant, he was by my side, his arms around me. "What happened?" he asked, his voice tight with concern. I couldn't find the words to explain. Instead, I picked up his phone from the coffee table and pulled up his mother's social media page. The video was right there at the top, already accumulating views and comments. Jack's face darkened as he watched, his jaw clenching tighter with each passing second. When it ended, he threw the phone onto the couch, his hands balling into fists. "That's it," he growled. "I'm done. I'm fucking done with her." Before I could respond, he was on his own phone, fingers flying across the screen. "I'm ordering us dinner. The best this city has to offer. We're going to celebrate my birthday right here, just the two of us." As we waited for the food to arrive, Jack's phone buzzed incessantly. His mother's name flashed on the screen again and again. "Finally," he answered, putting it on speaker. "Jack," Melissa's voice screeched. "Where are you?" "Everyone's waiting. I have a cake, presents." "Save it, Mom." Jack cut her off, his voice cold. "I saw what you did to Amanda. I'm not coming, and I don't want to speak to you again." He hung up, tossing the phone aside. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of gourmet food and quiet conversation. Despite everything, I felt a warmth in my chest. Jack had chosen me. He'd stood up to his mother for me. Just as we were finishing our dessert, there was a pounding at the door. Jack opened it to reveal his mother, her face flushed with anger. "How dare you embarrass me like this?" Melissa hissed, pushing past him into the apartment. Her eyes landed on me, narrowing dangerously. "This is all your fault, you little gold digger." Jack stepped between us. "That's enough, Mom. Leave. Now." She turned on him, her voice dripping with venom. "If you don't leave this nobody right now, you'll regret it. I'll cut you off completely. No inheritance, no connections. I'll ruin your career. No company in this city will hire you." I felt a chill run down my spine. After what she'd done to my career, I knew these weren't empty threats. But Jack stood firm. "I don't care," he said. "I choose Amanda. Every time." His mother's face contorted with rage. "You ungrateful brat. I'll destroy you both, do you hear me? You'll be living on the streets by the time I'm done with you." With that, she stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I turned to Jack, fear gripping my heart. "Jack, what if she really does?" He cut me off with a gentle kiss. "She's bluffing," he said, but I could see a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "She won't actually harm her own son. We'll be fine, Amanda. I promise." As we cleaned up the remnants of our impromptu birthday dinner, I tried to share Jack's optimism, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. The next 2 weeks passed in a haze of anxious waiting. Jack and I tried to go about our lives normally, but there was a constant undercurrent of tension. Every time the phone rang, we'd exchange worried glances. Then, one evening, Jack came home later than usual. One look at his face told me everything. "They fired me," he said, his voice hollow. "Just like that. Seems Mom has some powerful friends, including the CEO. She called in a favor." We sat on the couch, the silence heavy between us. Everything we'd feared was coming true. "What are we going to do?" I whispered. Jack ran his hands through his hair, his frustration palpable. "I don't know. Maybe we should just leave. Sell the apartment, move to another state, start over where she can't reach us. As tempting as that sounded, something nagged at me. There had to be more to this story. Jack, I said slowly, why did your parents divorce? You've never really talked about it. He shrugged. I don't know the details. Dad just left one day. Mom always said he abandoned us. I took a deep breath. Maybe it's time we heard his side of the story. Jack looked skeptical, but after some persuasion he agreed to call his father. To our surprise, his dad answered immediately, his voice choked with emotion at hearing from his son after so many years. We arranged to meet at a quiet cafe the next day. Jack's father, Robert, was a tall man with Jack's kind eyes and an air of resigned sadness about him. After awkward introductions, Robert began his story. Your mother and we both worked for my father's company. She was in accounting. One day the IRS came knocking. They'd found evidence of tax evasion. My father was arrested. The company was in chaos. He paused, his hands shaking slightly as he sipped his coffee. Your mother stepped up, took control. She saved the company, turned it around. But I always had my suspicions. About what Jack asked, leaning forward. Robert's voice dropped to a whisper. I think she set my father up. She had access, motive. I confronted her about it, and, well, that's when everything fell apart. He went on to describe how Jack's mother had threatened him with compromising photos, evidence of an affair with a prominent politician's wife. She gave me a choice: leave quietly, give her everything, and never contact you. Or she'd ruin me completely. I was a coward, Jack. I'm so sorry. As Robert's story unfolded, I felt a chill run down my spine. The woman he described calculating, ruthless, willing to destroy anyone in her path was all too familiar. Jack sat in stunned silence, trying to process this new information about his mother. I could see the hurt and betrayal in his eyes, but also a spark of something else. Determination, maybe even hope. And then something clicked in my mind. A memory from my time at the agency surfaced, something I'd seen but hadn't fully understood at the time. Wait, I said, sitting up straighter. I think I might have something. Jack and his father looked at me, confusion evident on their faces. When I worked for your mother, I explained, my words tumbling out in a rush. I saw her working on the books. She was doing double entry bookkeeping, but something seemed off about it. I didn't think much of it then, but now. Jack's eyes widened. You think you might have evidence of tax fraud? I nodded, my heart racing. It's possible. I kept copies of some files on my laptop for work. They might still be there. We hurried back to our apartment, hope fueling our steps. I booted up my old work laptop, praying the files were still there. After what felt like an eternity of searching, I found them: spreadsheets and financial records that clearly showed discrepancies. This is it, Jack's father breathed, looking over my shoulder. This could be the proof we need. Jack squeezed my hand, his eyes shining with a mixture of gratitude and determination. We need to take this to the authorities, he said. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. We submitted our evidence to the tax authorities, triggering a full-scale audit of Melissa's company. The investigation was thorough and relentless. When the results came in, they were even more damning than we'd imagined. The scale of the tax evasion was massive, spanning years and involving millions of dollars. Melissa was arrested and charged with multiple counts of fraud and tax evasion. The trial was a media sensation, but we kept our heads down, focusing on rebuilding our lives. When the verdict came in guilty on all counts, it felt like a weight had been lifted from our shoulders. In the aftermath, the court decided to transfer ownership of the company to Jack as the rightful heir. It was overwhelming, but Jack had a clear vision of what he wanted to do. Dad, he said, turning to his father, I want you to come back and run the company. You built this business from the ground up. It's time for you to take it back. Robert's eyes welled with tears as he embraced his son. I'd be honored, he said. As for me, Jack insisted that I return to my old position. You're the best in the business, he said with a grin. We'd be fools not to have you on board. It's been a year since then. The company is thriving under Robert's leadership, with Jack learning the ropes by his side. I'm back doing the work I love, respected and valued for my contributions. But the best part? We're a family again. Robert is a constant presence in our lives, making up for lost time with Jack and becoming the father-in-law I never knew I needed. We have weekly family dinners, filled with laughter and love, a far cry from the tense, miserable affairs of the past. As I sit here in our new home, watching Jack and his dad pore over some business plans, I can't help but marvel at how far we've come. We've weathered the storm, faced down seemingly insurmountable odds, and come out stronger on the other side.